Hi folks, in this lesson we're going to apply the sociological perspective to an analysis of bureaucracy. You can focus on some information found on pages 5 and 6 in your third study guide, and likewise there is valuable information in chapter 5 in the text. I'd like to start off by focusing on, or to be more precise, apply the conflict model or perspective to bureaucracy. Sociologists using this perspective would argue that bureaucracies are characterized by great differences as to power, control, income, status, and other valued resources. In short, bureaucratic structures benefit those at the top, the elites, often at the expense of middle and lower level employees. Essentially, bureaucratic organizations tend to be undemocratic because the interests and the wants of the workers tend to be de-emphasized or ignored. Conflict theorists also would argue that organizations are primarily concerned with their own self-interest, even if that means putting people at risk. Witt, for example, highlights the fact that a Motorola engineer who created the first mobile phone in the 1960s advised that a lock be placed on the dial so that a person using the phone would not talk while in the act of driving an automobile. Yet, despite the fact today that there is considerable evidence that driver distraction associated with cell phone use has increased the number of automobile accidents, the digital communication industry still doesn't really publicize the significant dangers of using cell phones while driving. Well, why not? According to conflict theorists, cell phone sales create huge profits for the corporations producing such devices. And unfortunately, there are other examples like the Bridgestone-Firestone tire controversy of a number of years ago, where the company knew full well that it was producing a product that could put lives in jeopardy, yet they went right ahead and did it as such. Now, there is a limit to this approach, a shortcoming, when applying the conflict model. There's an assumption that underlies it that the more equality there is in an organization, the result will be a more effective, productive, and successful organization. Well, that's not necessarily always true. For example, some organizations have utilized self-managing, or if you wish, self-management work teams as a way of improving productivity and morale. Yet, these approaches have sometimes failed due to management interference and less than effective team leaders. Also, you want to remember that there are effective, profitable, and efficient organizations that do not take advantage of middle and lower level employees. Now, as to applying the functionalist model, sociologists would highlight the fact that bureaucracies have become a very important form of organization because they are effective in terms of encouraging people to work together and encourage them to achieve specific goals or results. Although some complain about bureaucratic rules and regulations, often referred to as red tape. This is kind of an interesting cartoon. Red tape, as is pointed out by McShonas, was used by administrators in 18th century England in order to wrap official records and packages. But McShonas points out the fact, as do other sociologists using more of a functionalist bent to their approach to bureaucracy, and Theo in particular brings this out, that red tape can have its benefits. The requirement, for example, Theo uses this as a really good illustration of securing a government permit to open a landfill. Now, this may appear on the surface to be overtly complex, time-consuming, and expensive, just a bunch of paperwork requirements, especially to the organization that is seeking to operate the dump site. Yet, on the other hand, for those who may be living near the site, the red tape rules and regulations provide a guarantee of sorts that appropriate safeguards or precautions will be provided. Furthermore, this notion of impersonality that marks all bureaucratic structures, it too, according to functionalist-oriented sociologists, can have real benefits. Government subsidies of various sorts are provided in an impersonal way so as to discourage discrimination. Put in another way, by doing this in an impersonal way, there's an effort made to discourage the effect of personal friendships or political pull. In other words, greater equality as such. Plus, you want to remember that much of what makes up what we refer to as the good life, leisure pursuits, activities, education, healthcare, work, and the like, is provided via bureaucratic structures. On the other hand, as you will note in page 5 of your study guide, using the functionalist approach, it's easy for us to highlight the fact that there are some real shortcomings with respect to bureaucratic organizations. Sort of like this. Let's look at some of these dysfunctions. Again, these are found on page 5 of your third study guide, and a number of them are highlighted in chapter 5 in the textbook as well. First and foremost, service without a smile. Bureaucracies are marked by impersonality, impartiality. This is designed to encourage efficiency, but it can also prove to be restrictive. Generally, officials at large bureaucratic organizations consider and treat clients in a rather standardized way. In short, the clients become standard cases. As a result of this, clients, as well as people who are employed within a bureaucratic organization, may come to feel that they are powerless, that they are isolated, their lives don't have meaning. Marx referred to this as alienation. This is illustrated very graphically in a clip from an old Charlie Chaplin film. Literally, once we feel this sense of alienation, this could contribute to a series of other problems. You ever felt this way? That you're nothing but a number as such? Well, again, alienation could contribute to problems such as stress, health issues, absenteeism, theft, high turnover rate at the workplace, and also whistleblowing, where employees report to legal authorities misconduct within the organization itself. Another potential problem that crops up in all bureaucracies has to do with the second you see listed on page 5. Rules are rules. Rules are rules. And by the way, another way to illustrate, before I go into this second dysfunction of a sense of alienation, take a moment and look at this fairly well-known portrait by Toker. It's entitled Government Bureaucracy. It's incorporated in a number of introduction to sociology textbooks as a way of highlighting and reinforcing this strong notion of alienation that sometimes crops up in bureaucratic organizations. If you look closely, the clients, the regular folks you see out front here, are being presented almost as cases. They appear to be the same. Furthermore, focus on the bureaucratic employees hiding behind, or at least appearing behind, glass-walled cages. They are literally faceless. Their hands are on, if you look closely, they're on calculators. See them here? Okay. All suggesting again that they're more interested in reducing what they're doing to numbers so as to produce greater efficiency. They don't appear to be interested that much in truly assisting or supporting the clients. There's kind of an ominous tone, and again, the dark colors that he employs here just reinforces it. So bear in mind again the issue of alienation. Another problem that sometimes crops up with respect to bureaucratic organizations is bureaucratic ritualism, a focus on the rules. This was highlighted by this gentleman, Veblen. He came up with the notion of trained incapacity. And what he basically implied by that is that bureaucrats tend to mechanically follow the rules. They may have real difficulty employing new and imaginative and creative approaches and responses to situations and circumstances. His argument was that ritualism can literally produce inefficiency. A really interesting illustration of this came several years ago with respect to a Boy Scout who was separated from his group while hiking through a national forest. He was quickly located by a helicopter rescue team. He waved when he saw the aircraft, but it did not land because of a federal regulation prohibiting the landing of any aircraft on national forest land, even though there was plenty of room for the helicopter to land adjacent to the Scout. The rescue members reported that the boy saw them and was waving his arms, so they took him to be okay. Rescue authorities then ordered a path be cut up the rugged, hilly terrain to where the boy was located. After 3 days of struggling to create that path and realizing it was going to take them several more days to probably complete it, permission was finally granted to bypass the landing restriction, and after 3 days, the Scout was rescued. It might be illustrated in this way. That is to say, trained incapacity. And this cartoon also highlights, to a degree, what Veblen was getting at. As well as this one. And this one has some real life application. Some of you might remember the terrible events surrounding Hurricane Katrina, when it basically devastated New Orleans. The response, particularly of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has been highlighted by many sociologists as a classic example of trained incapacity. I do recall an instance of, again, a triage center desperately seeking additional medications from a FEMA center in Baton Rouge. When they finally were able to make contact over radio phone with a bureaucrat at the FEMA office in Baton Rouge, the response was, well, we got your written request for additional medications. We can't send it to you because you didn't fill it out in triplicate. So think about, again, the implications of trained incapacity. In the next lesson, we'll look at some additional dysfunctions associated with bureaucracy.